Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now, and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange thing, this strange idea, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to? Lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with the anxieties of the 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night, or maybe even background noise or simply company. As far as I know, there are a couple of different ways to engage with the show. The primary idea, the idea behind it, is that it gives you something to focus on, a story or an event that lets you keep your mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties. To help you to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for you. And the second way, for some people, is a little bit different. Some might just need some kind of background noise, some kind of white noise, or some people maybe need the sound of the ocean, or the wind in the trees, or the rain, or some boring dude droning on in the background. So just lie back and listen, don't force the sleep, and keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story, and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but don't feel pressurized. This may not work on the first night. It may take a few nights for you to get used to listening to my voice. Maybe my accent is strange to you. Maybe one episode just isn't long enough. Or maybe your problem isn't going to sleep. Maybe your problem is waking up in the middle of the night. What I recommend is to let the podcast run all night. Download a whole bunch of episodes in your podcast player of choice. Put them in a playlist, and when you go to bed, let them go. That way, if you wake up and it's still running, you find yourself awake, you can just carry on listening and allow yourself to go straight back to sleep again. You can even do the same thing if you wake up before your alarm. 60 minutes or as little as 30 minutes. Just carry on listening and go right back to sleep again. And this may sound strange, it may seem pointless, but let me tell you that there is something about allowing complete relaxation right before the alarm that's satisfying on a deep, deep level. And it's important as you listen to try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you, so give it a chance. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to ask for a couple of minutes of your time. If you would like to support Sleepy Time Tales, To help me keep it going out to thousands of insomniacs just like you, please consider supporting on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that helps me keep the lights on and also gets you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. For $2 a month, you get weekly access to early release on the main episodes, and $5 a month gets you weekly bonus minisodes, special edits, and a monthly megasode, which is all the previous month's releases in one big listen. And if monthly is a big ask, which is understandable, you can make once-off tips through the tip jar on the website. I've also got some merchandise up on a TeePublic store, which you can reach through the show notes or via the website at sleepytimetales.net. And simply spreading the word, you can help me in my mission to give more people a restful night's sleep. To do my small part, to do our small part in improving their lives. And I haven't mentioned in a while that I left my job recently to focus full-time on podcast editing and production. Things are starting to pick up, but I've still got some slots available. So if anyone is wanting to start a podcast in the new year and is needing some help with the editing, setup, admin, any stuff like that, you can give me a call and I will give you a good rate and the best service that you can get. My details are in the show notes as well, and I'm here to help. And that's it for tonight. Thanks for your time. Let's get back to the show. We return this week to Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Tents, lunch, and croquet utensils having been sent on beforehand, the party was soon embarked, and the two boats pushed off together, leaving Mr. Lawrence waving his hat on the shore. Laurie and Joe rowed one boat, Mr. Brooke and Ned the other, while Fred Vaughan, the riotous twin, did his best to upset both by paddling about in a wherry like a disturbed waterbug. Joe's funny hat deserved a vote of thanks, for it was of general utility. It broke the ice in the beginning by producing a laugh. It created quite a refreshing breeze, flapping to and fro as she rowed, and would make an excellent umbrella for the whole party if a shower came up, she said. Miss Kate decided that she was odd, but rather clever, and smiled upon her from afar. Meg in the other boat was delightfully situated, face to face with the rowers, who both admired the prospect and feathered their oars with uncommon skill and dexterity. Mr. Brooke was a grave, silent young man, with handsome brown eyes and a pleasant voice. Meg liked his quiet manners and considered him a walking encyclopedia of useful knowledge. He never talked to her much, but he looked at her a good deal, and she felt sure that he did not regard her with aversion. Ned, being in college, of course put on all the airs which freshmen think it is their bounden duty to assume. He was not very wise, but very good-natured, and altogether an excellent person to carry on a picnic. Sally Gardner was absorbed in keeping her white-beak dress clean, and chattering with the ubiquitous Fred, who kept Beth in constant terror by his pranks. It was not far to Longmeadow, but the tent was pitched and the wickets down by the time they arrived. A pleasant green field with 3 wide-spreading oaks in the middle, and a smooth strip of turf for croquet. "Welcome to Camp Lawrence," said the young host, as they landed with exclamations of delight. "Brooke is Commander-in-Chief. I am Commissary General. The other fellows are staff officers, and you, ladies, are company. The tent is for your special benefit, and that oak is your drawing room. This is the mess room, and the third is the camp kitchen. Now let's have a game before it gets hot. and then we'll see about dinner. Frank, Beth, Amy, and Grace sat down to watch the game played by the other 8. Mr. Brooke chose Meg, Kate, and Fred. Laurie took Sally, Joe, and Ned. The English played well, but the Americans played better, and contested every inch of the ground as strongly as if the spirit of '76 inspired them. Joe and Fred had several skirmishes, and once narrowly escaped high words. Joe was through the last wicket and had missed the stroke, which failure ruffled her a good deal. Fred was close behind her, and his turn came before hers. He gave a stroke, his ball hit the wicket, and stopped an inch on the wrong side. No one was very near, and running up to examine, he gave it a sly nudge with his toe, which put it just an inch on the right side. "I'm through. Now, Miss Joe, I'll settle you and get in first," cried the young gentleman, swinging his mallet for another blow. "You pushed it. I saw you. It's my turn now," said Joe sharply. "Upon my word, I didn't move it. It rolled a bit, perhaps, but that is allowed. So stand off, please, and let me have a go at the stake." "We don't cheat in America, but you can if you choose," said Joe angrily. "Yankees are a deal the most tricky everybody knows." "There you go," returned Fred, croqueting her ball far away. Joe opened her lips to say something rude, but checked herself in time, held it up to her forehead, and stood a minute, hammering down a wicket with all her might, while Fred hit the stake and declared himself out with much exultation. She went off to get her ball, and was a long, long time finding it among the bushes. But she came back, cool and quiet, and waited her turn patiently. It took several strokes to regain the place she had lost, and when she got there, the other side had nearly won. For Kate's ball was the last but one, and lay near the stake. "By George, it's all up with us. Goodbye, Kate." "Miss Joe owes me one, so you're finished," cried Fred excitedly, as they all drew near to see the finish. "Yankees have a trick of being generous to their enemies," said Joe, with a look that made the lad redden. "Especially when they beat them," she added, as leaving Kate's ball untouched, she won the game by a clever stroke. Laurie threw up his hat, then remembered that it wouldn't do to exult over the defeat of his guests, and stopped in the middle of the chair to whisper to his friend, "Good for you, Joe. He did cheat, I saw him. We can't tell him so, but he won't do it again. Take my word for it." Meg drew her aside, under pretense of pinning up a loose braid, and said approvingly, "It was dreadfully provoking. But you kept your temper, and I'm so glad, Joe." "Don't praise me, Meg, for I could box his ears this minute. I should certainly have boiled over it if I hadn't stayed among the nettles till I got my rage under control, enough to hold my tongue. It's simmering now, so I hope he'll keep out of my way," returned Joe, biting her lips as she glowered at Fred from under her big hat. "Time for lunch," said Mr. Brooke, looking at his watch. "Commissary General, will you make the fire and get water, while Miss March, Miss Sally, and I spread the table? Who can make good coffee?" "Joe can," said Meg, glad to recommend her sister. So Joe, feeling that her late lessons in cookery were about to do her honor, went to preside over the coffee pot, while the children collected dry sticks, and the boys made a fire and got water from a spring nearby. Miss Kate sketched, and Frank talked to Beth, who was making little mats of braided rushes to serve as plates. The commander-in-chief and his aides soon spread the tablecloth, with an inviting array of eatables and drinkables, prettily decorated with green leaves. Joe announced that the coffee was ready, and everyone settled themselves to a hearty meal, for youth is seldom dyspeptic, and exercise develops wholesome appetites. A very merry lunch it was, where everything seemed fresh and funny, and frequent peals of laughter started a venerable horse who fed nearby. There was a pleasing inequality in the table, which produced many mishaps to cups and plates. Acorns dropped in the milk, little black ants partook of the refreshments without being invited, and fuzzy caterpillars swung down from the tree to see what was going on. 3 white-headed children peeped over the fence, and an objectionable dog barked at them from the other side of the river, with all his might and main. "There's salt here," said Laurie, as he handed Joe a saucer of berries. "Thank you. I prefer spiders," she replied, fishing up 2 unwary little ones who had gone to a creamy death. "How dare you remind me of that horrid dinner party, and yours is so nice in every way," added Joe, as they both laughed and ate out of one plate, the china having run short. "I had an uncommonly good time that day, and haven't got over it yet. This is no credit to me, you know. I don't do anything. It's you and Meg and Brooke who make it all go, and I'm no end obliged to you." "What shall we do when we can't eat any more?" asked Laurie, feeling that his trump card had been played when lunch was over. "Have games till it's cooler. I brought authors, and I dare say Miss Kate knows something new and nice. Go and ask her. She's company, and you ought to stay with her more." "Aren't you company too?" "I thought she'd suit Brooke, but he keeps talking to Meg, and Kate just stares at them through that ridiculous glass of hers. I'm going, so you needn't try to preach propriety, for you can't do it, Joe." Miss Kate did know several new games, and as the girls would not, and the boys could not, eat any more, they all adjourned to the drawing room to play rigmarole. One person begins a story, any nonsense you like, and tells as long as he pleases, only taking care to stop short at some exciting point, when the next takes it up and does the same. It's very funny when done well, and makes a perfect jumble of tragical, comical stuff to laugh over. "Please start it, Mr. Brooke," said Kate, with a commanding air, which surprised Meg, who treated the tutor with as much respect as any other gentleman. Lying on the grass at the feet of the 2 young ladies, Mr. Brooke obediently began the story, with the handsome brown eyes steadily fixed upon the sunshiny river. Once upon a time, a knight went out into the world to seek his fortune, for he had nothing but his sword and shield. He travelled a long while, nearly 28 years, and had a hard time of it, till he came to the palace of a good old king, who had offered a reward to anyone who could tame and train a fine but unbroken colt, of which he was very fond. The knight agreed to try, and got on slowly but surely, for the colt was a gallant fellow, and soon learned to love his new master, though he was freakish and wild. Every day when he gave his lessons to this pet of the king's, The knight rode him through the city, and as he rode, he looked everywhere for a certain beautiful face, which he had seen many times in his dreams but never found. One day, as he went prancing down a quiet street, he saw at the window of a ruinous castle the lovely face. He was delighted, inquired who lived in this old castle, and was told that several captive princesses were kept there by a spell, and spun all day to lay up money to buy their liberty. The knight wished intensely that he could free them, but he was poor and could only go by each day, watching for the sweet face and longing to see it out in the sunshine. At last he resolved to get into the castle and ask how he could help them. He went and knocked. The great door flew open and he beheld a ravishingly lovely lady who exclaimed, with a cry of rapture, at last, continued Kate, who had read French novels and admired the style. "'Tis she," cried Count Gustav, fell at her feet in an ecstasy of joy. "Oh, rise," she said, extending a hand of marble fairness. "Never, till you tell me how I may rescue you," swore the knight, still kneeling. "Alas, my cruel fate condemns me to remain here till my tyrant is destroyed." "Where is the villain?" "In the Mauve Salon. Go, brave heart, and save me from despair." "I obey, and return victorious or dead." With these thrilling words he rushed away, and flinging open the door of the Mauve Salon, was about to enter when he received a stunning blow from the big Greek lexicon, which an old fellow in a black gown fired at him, said Ned. Instantly Sir What's-his-name recovered himself, pitched the tyrant out of the window and turned to join the lady, victorious. But with a bump on his brow, found the door locked, tore up the curtains, made a rope ladder, got halfway down when the ladder broke, and he went head first into the moat, 60 feet below. Could swim like a duck, paddled round the castle till he came to a little door, guarded by 2 stout fellows, knocked their heads together till they cracked like a couple of nuts. Then, by a trifling exertion of his prodigious strength, he smashed in the door, went up a pair of stone steps covered with dust a foot thick, toads as big as your fist, and spiders that would frighten you into hysterics, Miss March. At the top of these steps he came plump upon a sight that took his breath away and chilled his blood. A tall figure, all in white, with a veil over its face and a lamp in its wasted hand, went on Meg. It beckoned, gliding noiselessly before him down a corridor as dark and cold as any tomb. Shadowy effigies in armor stood on either side. A dead silence reigned. The lamp burned blue, and the ghostly figure, ever and anon, turned its face toward him, showing the glitter of awful eyes through its white veil. They reached a curtained door, behind which sounded lovely music. He sprang forward to enter, but the spectre plucked him back and waved threateningly before him. "A snuff-box," said Joe in a sepulchral tone, which convulsed the audience. "Thank ye," said the knight politely, as he took a pinch, and sneezed 7 times so violently that his head fell off. "Aha," laughed the ghost, and having peeped through the keyhole at the princess's spinning away for dear life, the evil spirit picked up her victim and put him in a large tin box, where there were 11 other knights packed together without their heads, like sardines, who all rose and began to dance a hornpipe, cut in Fred, as Joe paused for breath. and as they danced, the rubbishy old castle turned to a man-of-war in full sail. Up with the jib, reef the topsail halyards, helm hard alee and man the guns, roared the captain, as a Portuguese pirate hove in sight, with a flag black as ink flying from her foremast. Go in and win, my hearties, says the captain, and a tremendous fight began. Of course the British beat, they always do. No, they don't, cried Joe aside. Having taken the pirate captain prisoner, sailed slap over the schooner, whose decks were piled high with dead, and whose lee scuppers ran blood. For the order had been cutlasses and die hard. Boatswain's mate, take a bite of the flying jib sheet, and start this villain if he doesn't confess his sins double quick, said the British captain. The Portuguese held his tongue like a brick and walked the plank, while the jolly tars cheered like mad. But the sly dog dived, came up under the man-o'-war, scuttled her, and down she went, with all sail set, to the bottom of the sea where— "Oh, gracious, what shall I say?" cried Sally, as Fred ended his rigmarole, in which he had jumbled together pell-mell nautical phrases and facts out of one of his favourite books. Well, they went to the bottom, and a nice mermaid welcomed them, but was much grieved on finding the box of headless knights, and kindly pickled them in brine, hoping to discover the mystery about them. For being a woman, she was curious. By and by a diver came down, and the mermaid said, "I'll give you a box of pearls if you can take it up," for she wanted to restore the poor things to life, and couldn't raise the heavy load herself. So the diver hoisted it up, and was much disappointed on opening it to find no pearls. He left it in a great lonely field, where it was found by a little goose girl, who kept 100 fat geese in the field, said Amy, when Sally's invention gave out. The little girl was sorry for them and asked an old woman what she should do to help them. "Your geese will tell you, they know everything," said the old woman. So she asked what she should use for new heads, since the old ones were lost. And all the geese opened their 100 mouths and screamed. "Cabbages," continued Laurie promptly. "Just the thing," said the girl, and ran to get 12 fine ones from her garden. She put them on. The knights revived at once, thanked her, and went on their way rejoicing, never knowing the difference. For there were so many other heads like them in the world that no one thought anything of it. The knight in whom I'm interested went back to find the pretty face, and learned that the princesses had spun themselves free, and had all gone and married but one. He was in a great state of mind at that, and mounting the colt, who stood by him through thick and thin, rushed to the castle to see which was left. Peeping over the hedge, he saw the queen of his affections picking flowers in her garden. "Will you give me a rose?" said he. "You must come over and get it." "I can't come to you, it isn't proper," said she, as sweet as honey. He tried to climb over the hedge, but it seemed to grow thicker and higher. Then he tried to push through, but it grew thicker and thicker, and he was in despair. So he patiently broke twig after twig, till he had made a little hole through which he peeped, saying imploringly, "Let me in, let me in." But the pretty princess did not seem to understand, for she picked her roses quietly and left him to fight his way in. Whether he did or not, Frank will tell you. "I can't. I'm not playing, I never do," said Frank, dismayed at the sentimental predicament out of which he was to rescue the absurd couple. Beth had disappeared behind Joe and Grace was asleep. "So the poor knight is to be left sticking in the hedge, is he?" asked Mr. Brooke, still watching the river and playing with the wild rose in his buttonhole. "I guess the princess gave him a posy and opened the gate after a while," said Laurie, smiling to himself as he threw acorns at his tutor. "What a piece of nonsense we have made. With practice, we might do something quite clever. Do you know Truth?" "I hope so," said Meg soberly. "The game, I mean." "What is it?" said Fred. "Why, you pile up your hands, choose a number and draw it out in turn. And the person who draws at the number has to answer truly any question put by the rest. It's great fun." "Let's try it," said Joe, who liked new experiments. Miss Kate and Mr. Brooke, Meg and Ned declined. But Fred, Sally, Joe, and Laurie piled and drew, and the lot fell to Laurie. "Who are your heroes?" asked Joe. "Grandfather and Napoleon." "Which lady here do you think prettiest?" said Sally. "Margaret." "Which do you like best?" from Fred. "Joe, of course." "What silly questions you ask." And Joe gave a disdainful shrug as the rest laughed at Laurie's matter-of-fact tone. "Try again. Truth isn't a bad game," said Fred. "It's a very good one for you," retorted Joe in a low voice. Her turn came next. "What is your greatest fault?" asked Fred, by way of testing in her the virtue he lacked himself. "A quick temper." "What do you most wish for?" said Laurie. "A pair of bootlacings," returned Joe, guessing and defeating his purpose. "Not a true answer. You must say what you really do want the most." "Genius. Don't you wish you could give it to me, Laurie?" And she slyly smiled in his disappointed face. "What virtues do you most admire in a man?" asked Sally. "Courage and honesty." "Now my turn," said Fred as his hand came last. "Let's give it to him," whispered Laurie to Joe, who nodded and asked at once, "Didn't you cheat at croquet?" "Well, yes, a little bit." "Good. Didn't you take your story out of the sea lion?" said Laurie. "Rather." "Don't you think the English nation perfect in every respect?" asked Sally. "I should be ashamed of myself if I didn't." "He's a true John Bull." "Now, Miss Sally, you shall have a chance without waiting to draw. I'll harrow up your feelings first by asking if you don't think you're something of a flirt," said Laurie, as Joe nodded to Fred as a sign that peace was declared. "You impertinent boy, of course I'm not," exclaimed Sally, with an air that proved the contrary. "What do you hate most?" asked Fred. "Spiders and rice pudding." "What do you like best?" asked Joe. "Dancing and French gloves." "Well, I think Truth is a very silly play. Let's have a sensible game of authors to refresh our minds," proposed Joe. Ned, Frank, and the little girls joined in this, and while it went on, the three elders sat apart, talking. Miss Kate took out her sketch again, and Margaret watched her, while Mr. Brooke lay on the grass with a book which he did not read. "How beautifully you do it. I wish I could draw," said Meg, with mingled admiration and regret in her voice. "Why don't you learn?" "I should think you had taste and talent for it," said Miss Kate graciously. I haven't time. Your mama prefers other accomplishments, I fancy. So did mine. But I proved to her that I had talent by taking a few lessons privately, and then she was quite willing I should go on. Can't you do the same with your governess? I forget young ladies in America go to school more than with us. Very fine schools there are too, Papa says. You go to a private one, I suppose? I don't go at all. I'm a governess myself. Oh, indeed, said Miss Kate. But she might as well have said, dear me, how dreadful, for her tone implied it, and something in her face made Meg colour and wish she had not been so frank. Mr. Brooke looked up and said quickly, young ladies in America love independence as much as their ancestors did, and are admired and respected for supporting themselves. Oh yes, of course, it's very nice and proper in them to do so. We have many most respectable and worthy young women who do the same, and are employed by the nobility, because being the daughters of gentlemen, they are both well-bred and accomplished, you know, said Miss Kate, in a patronizing tone that hurt Meg's pride, and made her work seem not only more distasteful, but degrading. Did the German song suit Miss March? Inquired Mr. Brooke, breaking an awkward pause. Oh yes, it was very sweet, and I'm much obliged to whoever translated it for me. And Meg's downcast face brightened as she spoke. Don't you read German? Asked Miss Kate with a look of surprise. Not very well. My father, who taught me, is away, and I don't get on very fast alone, for I've no one to correct my pronunciation. Try a little now. Here is Schiller's Mary Stuart, and a tutor who loves to teach. And Mr. Brooke laid his book on her lap with an inviting smile. It's so hard, I'm afraid, to try, said Meg, grateful but bashful, in the presence of the accomplished young lady beside her. I'll read a bit to encourage you. And Miss Kate read one of the most beautiful passages in a perfectly correct but perfectly expressionless manner. Mr. Brooke made no comment as she returned the book to Meg, who said, innocently, I thought it was poetry. And I'm going to leave it there for tonight. As always, if you want to pick up where we're leaving off, you can carry on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night and sweet dreams.